What if I told you that behind every golden age Hollywood scandal that never made headlines, there was a man who made problems disappear? While stars dazzled on screen, shadowy figures called fixers worked overtime covering up crimes, bribing journalists, and literally burying secrets 6 feet under. These weren't just publicists, they were Hollywood's most dangerous guardians, Eddie Mannix. Meet the man who turned crisis management into an art form. Eddie Mannix wasn't your typical studio executive. He was MGM's unofficial mob enforcer who kept stars out of prison and scandals out of newspapers. This tough-as-nails former construction worker had connections that reached from Hollywood Boulevard straight into organized crime families. Mannix's most shocking case involved actor George Reeves, TV's Superman. When Reeves died from a gunshot wound in 1959, the official ruling was self-harm, but whispers in Hollywood suggested Mannix orchestrated something far more sinister. Reeves had been having an affair with Mannix's wife, Toni, and threatened to expose MGM's dirty secrets. Within hours of Reeves' death, Mannix's people had cleaned the crime scene and controlled the narrative. The fixer's methods were ruthless, yet effective. He maintained detailed files on every star's weaknesses, from gambling debts to romantic entanglements. When Jean Harlow became pregnant by married co-star William Powell, Mannix arranged a secret procedure and crafted a cover story about her being hospitalized for exhaustion. Studio doctors, reporters, and even police were all on his payroll. Critics called Mannix Hollywood's most dangerous man, but studio heads saw him as essential. His ledger, discovered decades later, revealed the financial costs of covering up everything from drunk driving incidents to alleged homicides. Each scandal had a price tag, and MGM paid willingly to protect their investments. Mannix didn't just manage publicity, he controlled reality itself, deciding which truths would see daylight and which would vanish forever. Howard Strickling. While Mannix handled the dirty work, Howard Strickling perfected the art of controlling Hollywood's narrative. This former journalist turned MGM's head of publicity into a propaganda machine that could reshape public perception with surgical precision. Strickling understood that in Hollywood, image wasn't everything, it was the only thing. His most elaborate deception involved actress Loretta Young's pregnancy scandal. When Young became pregnant by married co-star Clark Gable in 1935, Strickling orchestrated one of Hollywood's most audacious cover-ups. He convinced the press that Young was taking an extended European vacation while she secretly gave birth. Then, in a move that would make fiction writers jealous, he arranged for Young to adopt her own biological daughter. The operation required military-level coordination. Strickling planted fake stories about Young's travels, arranged photograph doubles, and even staged a phony adoption ceremony. When reporters became suspicious about Young's sudden maternal instincts, he fed them alternative stories about her charitable nature. The truth remained hidden for over 3 decades, only emerging when Young finally confessed in her autobiography. Strickling's network extended beyond Hollywood into newsrooms across America. He maintained friendships with powerful columnists like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper, trading exclusive stories for their silence on bigger scandals. When Spencer Tracy's drinking became uncontrollable, Strickling created the Tracy Squad, a dedicated team of handlers who followed the actor everywhere, ready to clean up any mess. Industry insiders knew Strickling wielded more power than most studio heads. His files contained enough secrets to destroy dozens of careers, making him simultaneously Hollywood's most valuable and most feared figure. He didn't just manage stars, he manufactured legends. The Patricia Douglas case. Sometimes even the most powerful fixers met their match, and Patricia Douglas proved that courage could challenge the entire Hollywood machine. This young dancer's story reveals the darkest side of studio fixing, where covering up crimes became more important than justice. Her case exposed the brutal lengths fixers would go to protect their employers. In 1937, 20-year-old Douglas attended what she believed was a casting call for MGM. Instead, she found herself at a company party designed as entertainment for drunk executives. When sales executive David Ross assaulted her, Douglas did something unthinkable in Golden Age Hollywood. She fought back publicly. Her decision to press charges sent shockwaves through the studio system. Mannix immediately deployed his full arsenal against Douglas. He paid witnesses to lie about her character, planted stories about her being an alcoholic, and even convinced her own lawyer to sabotage her case. When Douglas appeared in court, she faced not just her attacker, but MGM's entire propaganda machine. Reporters who had been bought off painted her as a fame-seeking liar trying to extort money from the studio. The courtroom became a battlefield between truth and power. Despite having medical evidence and witnesses, Douglas watched her case crumble under MGM's coordinated assault. Her lawyer never showed up for the final hearing, having been paid off by studio fixers. When asked about Douglas years later, Mannix allegedly boasted, "We had her eliminated," though whether he meant her career or something more sinister remains unclear. Douglas's courage inspired other victims to speak out, but most were quickly silenced by similar tactics. Her case became a cautionary tale that kept other assault survivors quiet for decades. The fixers had won, but their victory came at the cost of exposing their true nature to anyone brave enough to look. The Fatty Arbuckle scandal. Before fixers became standard practice, Hollywood learned the hard way why they needed professional scandal managers. The Fatty Arbuckle case of 1921 didn't just destroy one man's career, it created an entire industry dedicated to preventing similar disasters. This tragedy became the blueprint for everything fixers would do afterward. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was comedy royalty, earning more than any actor in Hollywood when he attended a party at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel. When aspiring actress Virginia Rapp died after the party, witnesses claimed Arbuckle had assaulted her. The press went wild, describing lurid details of the alleged attack that sold millions of newspapers, but destroyed Arbuckle's reputation forever. What made this case different was Hollywood's complete lack of damage control. Studios had no protocol for handling scandals, no relationships with reporters, and no understanding of public relations warfare. Arbuckle faced 3 trials, with the third jury actually apologizing for the great injustice done to him. But by then, it was too late. His career was over. The financial fallout was catastrophic. Paramount lost millions on Arbuckle's unreleased films, and theater owners refused to show his movies. Studio executives realized they needed professional protection from similar disasters. Within months, they began hiring former journalists, ex-cops, and political operatives to serve as their first fixers. Arbuckle's tragedy became the ghost story that haunted every studio boardroom. Executives would point to his case whenever they needed to justify extreme measures to protect their stars. The innocent comedian who made audiences laugh became the cautionary tale that launched 1,000 cover-ups. His destruction proved that in Hollywood, perception was more powerful than truth, and studios would never again be caught unprepared. The death of Thomas Ince. Long before fixers became household names, they cut their teeth on Hollywood's most mysterious death. When pioneering director Thomas Ince died aboard media mogul William Randolph Hearst's yacht in 1924, the circumstances were so suspicious that even 1920s Hollywood couldn't ignore them. This case became the template for every cover-up that followed. Ince was one of early Hollywood's most respected directors, but he made the fatal mistake of getting too close to Hearst's mistress, actress Marion Davies. During a weekend cruise celebrating Ince's birthday, something went terribly wrong. Official reports claimed Ince suffered a heart attack, but whispers suggested Hearst had caught him with Davies and pulled the trigger. The cover-up began immediately. Hearst's newspaper empire swung into action, controlling every aspect of the story. Witnesses were paid off or threatened into silence, and the coroner's examination was suspiciously brief. Ince's body was cremated quickly, eliminating any evidence of gunshot wounds. Even the guest list from the yacht was mysteriously altered. What made this case revolutionary was how it demonstrated the power of coordinated media manipulation. Hearst didn't just control his own newspapers, he influenced coverage across the country through advertising boycotts and political pressure. Reporters who asked too many questions found themselves unemployed, while those who played along received exclusive stories and financial rewards. Hollywood executives watched this masterclass in damage control with fascination. They saw how one powerful man could literally rewrite reality through media manipulation and witness intimidation. The Ince case became required reading for future fixers, proving that, with enough money and influence, Even murders could be explained away as natural causes. Clark Gable's hit and run. Even Hollywood's biggest heartthrob wasn't immune to scandal, but studio fixers proved they could make even vehicular homicide disappear. Clark Gable's alleged hit-and-run incident in the 1930s showcased the terrifying efficiency of MGM's crisis management team. This case revealed how fixers could manipulate not just media coverage, but actual criminal investigations. Gable was driving drunk one night when he struck and killed a pedestrian. Witnesses saw the actor flee the scene, but by morning, the story had completely changed. Mannix and his team worked through the night, bribing witnesses, paying off police officials, and crafting an alternative narrative that painted Gable as the victim of mistaken identity. The official story claimed Gable had been at the studio all evening, working late on his next picture. Time cards were falsified, security guards were coached on their testimony, and even photographs were doctored to support the alibi. The actual driver, according to the new narrative, was a studio employee who looked similar to Gable in poor lighting. What made this cover-up particularly shocking was the involvement of law enforcement. Police detectives who originally suspected Gable suddenly developed memory problems after receiving mysterious payments. The investigation was quietly closed without any charges being filed. The victim's family received a substantial settlement from an anonymous benefactor on the condition they never discuss the case publicly. Years later, retired police officers would admit they knew the truth, but felt powerless to challenge MGM's influence. Gable continued his career as if nothing had happened, starring in some of his biggest hits while the victim's family suffered in silence. This case became legendary among fixers as proof that no crime was too serious to cover up if you had enough money and connections. Jean Harlow's medical emergencies. When MGM's platinum blonde bombshell, Jean Harlow, kept getting pregnant at inconvenient times, studio fixers turned reproductive health care into performance art. These weren't just cover-ups, they were elaborate medical fiction designed to protect the studio's most valuable asset. The lengths they went to preserve Harlow's image revealed the fixers' creativity in crafting believable lies. Harlow's first pregnancy by married co-star William Powell threatened to destroy both their careers. Strickling immediately went to work, checking Harlow into a private clinic under an assumed name. Hospital records were falsified to show she was being treated for severe anemia, complete with fake blood test results and doctor's notes describing her delicate condition. The procedure was performed by a studio-approved doctor who specialized in discretion. Afterward, Strickling planted stories about Harlow's dedication to her craft, working despite serious health problems. He even arranged for photographers to capture images of her looking pale and weak, selling the narrative that she was heroically pushing through illness for her art. When Harlow became pregnant again months later, the fixers refined their technique. This time, they created an elaborate story about appendicitis requiring emergency removal. The operation was performed at a facility owned by MGM's parent company, ensuring complete control over medical records and staff testimony. Harlow was photographed in a hospital bed with fake bandages and an IV drip. The most disturbing aspect was how these medical deceptions were celebrated in fan magazines. Studio publicists turned Harlow's manufactured health crises into proof of her professional dedication. Fans sent thousands of get-well cards, never knowing they were sympathizing with fictional illnesses designed to cover up reproductive choices deemed unsuitable for a movie star, the Spencer Tracy squad. When Spencer Tracy's alcoholism threatened to derail MGM's biggest productions, studio fixers created Hollywood's first celebrity intervention team. The Tracy Squad wasn't just damage control, it was a 24-hour surveillance and cleanup operation that followed the Oscar winner everywhere. This case showed how fixers evolved from reactive crisis managers to proactive problem preventers. Tracy's drinking binges were legendary, often lasting for days and ending with property damage, public scenes, or worse. After he disappeared for a week during production of Test Pilot, causing hundreds of thousands in delays, Strickling assembled a dedicated team of handlers. 4 former boxers, a doctor, and an ambulance crew were assigned to monitor Tracy around the clock. The squad's methods were both impressive and disturbing. They rented rooms adjacent to Tracy's in every hotel, installed listening devices in his dressing room, and maintained rotating shifts to ensure someone was always watching. When Tracy started drinking, The team would immediately move in, creating a mobile quarantine zone around the star until he sobered up. Their most challenging operation occurred during the filming of Boys Town. Tracy disappeared from the set and was found 3 days later in a Chicago bar, so drunk he couldn't remember his own name. The squad quietly transported him back to Los Angeles via private train car, telling reporters he was suffering from exhaustion and needed rest between scenes. What made the Tracy Squad revolutionary was how it normalized constant surveillance of stars. Other studios began creating similar teams for their problem actors, turning babysitting into a specialized profession within the fixer industry. Tracy never knew the full extent of the operation designed to protect him from himself, believing his handlers were simply studio assistants being unusually helpful. George Reeves' investigation. When TV's Superman died under mysterious circumstances, studio fixers faced their most dangerous challenge yet. George Reeves wasn't just another actor with secrets. He was sleeping with Eddie Mannix's wife and threatening to expose decades of Hollywood cover-ups. His death became the ultimate test of whether fixers could silence someone who knew where all the bodies were buried. Reeves had grown tired of being typecast as Superman and was planning to leave Hollywood for New York theater. But his affair with Toni Mannix, Eddie's socialite wife, complicated everything. Reeves knew about MGM's darkest secrets through pillow talk, making him potentially the most dangerous man in Hollywood. When he started talking about writing a tell-all book, alarm bells rang throughout the studio system. The official story claimed Reeves took his own life in his Benedict Canyon home, distraught over his fading career. But the crime scene was suspiciously clean, with evidence that suggested professional cleanup. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar cars in the area before the gunshot, and the lack of fingerprints on the weapon raised questions that police refused to investigate. Mannix's reaction to the death was telling. Instead of grief over losing his wife's lover, he seemed relieved, immediately launching into damage control mode. Witnesses who might have seen something were quickly relocated or convinced to change their stories. The coroner's investigation was unusually brief, with key evidence mysteriously disappearing from the police files. What made this case different was that Reeves had been preparing for war against the studio system. He had documented evidence of MGM's criminal activities and was planning to use it as leverage for better roles. His death sent a clear message to other actors about the consequences of betraying studio secrets. The man who played Superman learned that in Hollywood, even heroes aren't bulletproof. The Lana Turner, Johnny Stompanato murder. When Hollywood's sweater girl Lana Turner's teenage daughter stabbed her mother's mobster boyfriend to death, studio fixers faced their most complex challenge yet. This wasn't just about protecting a star's reputation, it was about turning a potential murder charge into a heroic rescue story. The 1958 killing of Johnny Stompanato became the masterpiece of spin that proved fixers could transform even the most damning evidence into a sympathetic narrative. Stompanato was no ordinary boyfriend. He was Mickey Cohen's enforcer with a violent temper and connections to organized crime families across the country. When he started threatening to disfigure Turner's face with acid if she tried to leave him, 14-year-old Cheryl Crane decided to protect her mother. The kitchen knife went straight into Stompanato's chest, killing him instantly in Turner's Beverly Hills mansion. Within hours, Turner's fixer team had completely reconstructed the crime scene. They coached Cheryl on her testimony, emphasizing how she feared for her mother's life. Police reports were carefully edited to highlight Stompanato's threats, while downplaying any evidence that suggested premeditation. Even the knife's position was adjusted to support the self-defense narrative. The most brilliant aspect of the cover-up was how fixers turned Turner's mob connections into a liability for the prosecution. They leaked stories about Stompanato's criminal background, painting him as a dangerous predator who had terrorized Hollywood's most beloved actress. Suddenly, the victim became the villain, and the killer became a heroic daughter protecting her mother. Turner's performance at the coroner's inquest was pure Hollywood magic. Dressed in widow's black and speaking in barely audible whispers, she described months of threats and violence. The fixers had coached her perfectly, knowing that public sympathy would make prosecution impossible. The jury ruled justifiable homicide within hours, and Cheryl was sent to reform school for a few months before quietly returning to her normal life. What made this case legendary was how the fixers used Turner's star power to control the narrative completely. They arranged exclusive interviews where she described her nightmare relationship, turning a mob killing into a cautionary tale about domestic violence. The real story of a teenager who may have planned the murder to save her mother was buried under layers of carefully crafted sympathy. The Marilyn Monroe Files. Long before she became the world's most famous blonde, Norma Jean Baker was just another troubled starlet whose entire identity was manufactured by studio fixers. What most people don't know is that Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a stage name. She was a complete fictional character created by 20th Century Fox's crisis management team. Her rise and tragic fall reveal how fixers could build legends just as easily as they destroyed them. The transformation began in 1946 when Fox executives decided Baker needed a complete makeover. Fixers arranged for painful dental work to create her famous smile, hormone treatments to enhance her figure, and acting coaches to develop her breathy speaking voice. Even her signature platinum blonde hair required dangerous chemical treatments that would cause health problems for years. But creating Monroe's image was just the beginning. Fixers had to constantly manage the contradictions between her public persona and private struggles. When Monroe's psychiatric hospitalizations threatened her career, they planted stories about her being overworked and exhausted. Her multiple miscarriages were explained away as stress-related health issues that demonstrated her dedication to her craft. The most disturbing aspect was how fixers used Monroe's mental health struggles as marketing tools. They encouraged her reputation for being difficult and unpredictable because it made her more fascinating to audiences. Behind the scenes, they were enabling her prescription drug addiction while publicly presenting her as a tragic romantic figure who couldn't handle fame. When Monroe began threatening to expose Hollywood's darkest secrets in the early 1960s, the same fixers who had created her began working to silence her. She knew too much about studio cover-ups, political scandals, and organized crime connections. Her famous affairs with President Kennedy and his brother Robert weren't just romantic entanglements. They were intelligence-gathering operations that terrified Washington and Hollywood alike. The circumstances of Monroe's death in 1962 remain suspicious precisely because of how quickly fixers moved to control the narrative. Within hours, her home had been cleaned of compromising evidence, and witnesses had been coached on their stories. The official cause of death was ruled accidental overdose, but many investigators believe the fixers orchestrated one final cover-up to prevent Monroe from destroying the careers and reputations of dozens of powerful men. Monroe's tragedy wasn't just personal. It was the inevitable result of a system that treated human beings as disposable products. The fixers, who had spent years crafting her image, ultimately decided she was more valuable dead than alive, with secrets to tell. These fixers didn't just manage publicity. They rewrote history itself, deciding which truths would survive and which would vanish forever. Their methods were brutal, their reach was unlimited, and their influence shaped every aspect of the entertainment industry. But here's the real question that should haunt every movie lover. If studio fixers could cover up murders, rapes, and massive criminal conspiracies with such ease, what secrets are today's entertainment industry still hiding? Drop your theories in the comments, because in Hollywood, the more things change, the more they stay eerily, dangerously the same.